I love gaming, guys. Gaming has been something that I've been doing for 30 plus years at this point, but there is a big problem in the gaming industry, the gaming discourse that can threaten everything and could be its downfall. But before we get into that and much more, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell if you're interested in RPG news, interested in Nintendo stuff, and discussions just like this. So let's talk about this because I feel that this could be a major problem in gaming. So I want to have more of a serious conversation with a few jabs here and there. So the big thing that I'm hearing is two separate topics, which we're going to get into, and that is 2D games aren't worth full price, or at least somewhat full price at this point, because now games have went up to $70, and now people are even still questioning if games are worth $60. Now, what I'm talking about is the recently revealed Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Sonic Superstars, and of course, Metroid Dread that was back in 2021. All of these games have been receiving criticism online discourse that it's not worth $60, and there is a problem. Now, there's another major problem that we're going to be dealing with, and that's the Starfield debate, which I have some interesting stuff to talk about there, so make sure you stick around for the full video. But let's get into this 2D thing first, because I discussed it back in 2021, and I thought that it was ridiculous that people were questioning if Metroid Dread is worth the $60 because of games like Hollow Knight or because of other high quality 2D games, maybe Cuphead, stuff like that. But you have to realize that some of these new high-end 2D games that are coming out are actually 3D. They're 3D modeled, running on a 2D plane in terms of the gameplay, but the models are actually 3D. A lot of the work that goes into it would be like a 3D game. Now, don't get me wrong, the complexity of a 2D game like a Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown or Sonic Superstars or Metroid Dread is not going to be quite up to the level of maybe something like Starfield or The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom when it comes down to it. However, value is not based off of the development cost. It's based off of what the game gives you personally. That is the biggest thing. Now, if 3D equals, okay, $60 or $70 for you, okay, that's fine. But there's been a lot of 3D games that are bad. So therefore, that is invalid in my opinion. Everybody here has played a 3D game that is not worth the price. So you can't just quite equate 3D equals full price. Not 3D doesn't equal full price, because there's been a lot of games, obviously, that aren't that good that are 3D. So you have to look at it in more than just one way. Can that be a factor for some people? Absolutely. You don't want to see every single game in 2D. So I understand that from that perspective. However, equating it to this equals this is a wrong way of looking at it, and nobody actually does that. There are many 2D games like Metroid Dread, like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and Sonic Superstars that once again have 3D models. There's certain things that they can do because those models are in 3D in terms of how they can pan the camera, how they can do certain gameplay aspects because they are. So kind of whittling it down to, oh, it's just a 2D game like it's the Super Nintendo 16-bit era or something like that is incorrect. If you're looking at it, when it comes to value, in my opinion, everybody evaluates things on different scales, but I think that everybody will all say, okay, well, it's based on how good the game is. What does it offer? What is the value in the game? Is there plenty of content? Nobody wants to buy a game for $60 and it lasts 25 seconds, right? There's barely any gameplay to it. So you want to see new abilities. You want to see great stages. You want to see tight controls. You want to see great graphics. You want to see great art. There are a variety of factors that goes into it. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of this $60 3D, 2D, not worth $60, because you guys think that somehow indie games like Hollow Knight or Shovel Knight or whatever the case is are so much better and they offer it for cheaper, whereas you can't really quite look at it that way, considering what some of these games are doing, like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Sonic Superstars, Metroid Dread, compared to what some of these smaller indie games are doing. Not to say that Hollow Knight or not to say that Shovel Knight and all that maybe aren't worth more. They could be worth more. You could be getting incredible value. But I think that these bigger high-end 2D games, in terms of just graphically with the models, 3D rendering and all that, that doesn't mean they're not worth it because they're playing on a 2D plane. And this, like I said, this type of thought process, this ignorant thought process could be gaming's downfall. When people just don't look at certain games and they look at it from a very narrow perspective, and maybe you miss out on an incredible game and a game doesn't do well because the developer tried something different on a 2D space in the modern end, and you don't want to play it, and you'll put your money into something that's maybe not as good or not as creative or not as innovative because you have a singular mindset on something and you're not willing to really branch out. I think that's going to be a big problem for gaming. I think that is a big problem for gaming, and it's a big problem for developers that want to create different types of experiences, maybe harken back to the old school, but then also input some newer end techniques. That's exactly what Metroid Dread is. That's exactly what Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is. That's exactly what Sonic Superstars is. And I wouldn't be surprised if these games, or more like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and Sonic Superstars, are some of the highest rated games of the year and offer some of the best value of the year. Now, in 2021, Metroid Dread was a Game of the Year contender. Heck, some places did give it Game of the Year. It was that good. It has a high 80s rating. It won Action Game of the Year at the Game Awards and many other awards as well. It's a super high quality experience with great replay value, incredible graphics, and really cool things that you really can't do in a pure 2D game like some people are trying to say. Oh, well, it's 2D, so therefore this. So I do think that this is a major problem and it needs to get worked out. It needs to get fixed. Now, Ubisoft recently showed off more of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and that game is looking fantastic. This is exactly what the innovation and what the new ideas, this is exactly what old franchises like Prince of Persia need. You need to have some more interest brought up. This is the most I've been interested in Prince of Persia in decades plus. Even when the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake was announced, that wasn't as exciting to me, at least, than this game here. And even if the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake had better graphics, I think I still might be more interested in this Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown game, because graphics are graphics, that's fine, but that doesn't change how things looked in terms of the combat and everything. And I'm looking at the combat in this game, and this looks incredible. It makes me want to play this more than any other Prince of Persia game that I've played in decades. And I know people love The Warrior Within and Sands of Time and those 3D games back in the 6th generation. I know people love the Prince of Persia, the one on the Xbox 360 and all that, but something tells me that this game, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, to me is going to be a bit more fun. It's going to be a bit more fun, or just as good as the previous Prince of Persia games, as the developers really hone in and focus in on the roots. Prince of Persia is a 2D game. It started out as an old school 2D game. So to me, this is going back to some of the roots. This is also taking from some of the things that does well in the gaming industry, like 2D games, Metroid Dread, Hollow Knight. These games are incredible, and I think that it creates something to where it feels fresh, it feels new, and it feels innovative in its own unique way. Same thing with Sonic Superstars, man. This is the most excited I've been for a Sonic game in decade plus. Like, Sonic Mania didn't even get me as excited as this, and I think that's a good comparison here, because Sonic Mania is a 2D game, but it's actually sprite based compared to Sonic Superstars, which is a full 3D game in terms of the models and what they can do, which they did talk about recently, but going on a 2D plane. But there's going to be cool 3D stuff they can add into the mix here. So to me, I think that Metroid Dread is starting a good trend when it comes to high-end, high-quality 2D games that, yeah, are worth full price if you think the value is there with the gameplay, the full package, not just it's on a 2D plane or it's playing from left to right, so therefore it's not worth it. Like right off the bat, it's like, no, there's more to these games than that. Now, the next discussion that we're going to have here, something that I feel is a major problem as well, is the 30 frames per second debate. This is something that I've avoided really talking about in a dedicated video, but I think that we need to actually discuss this because recently we've got the big reveal trailer or re-reveal trailer for Starfield. We've got the release date. We've got a bunch of gameplay and everything. And the news came out. Todd Howard confirmed it to IGN that the game will be at 30 frames per second. Now, this will not be the first or the last time. And we've had debates with this before in the past. Tears of the Kingdom, that was a big 30 frames per second debate, resolution debate. This has been something that's went on before with Redfall as a shooter and all of that. And I think that it's going to wildly vary based off the game, right? If a game is a smaller end game, like even like a Metroid Dread style or like a Sonic Superstars, yeah, you would expect stuff like that, right? With a 2D on a plane, right, with 3D model graphics, but you'd expect that to be 60 frames per second, right? Or even like a sports game or a racing game. But when it comes to something like Starfield, this is a massive, huge, galactic, literally galactic RPG that's slower paced, you know, that's not really a Twitch shooter like a Doom or a Wolfenstein or something like that in the modern age. So the fact that it has all of these locations, all of these areas, all of these mechanics, all of these physics, all of that takes a toll on the CPU, takes a toll on the system. And this 60 frames per second versus 30 frames per second, I think it stifles what a developer is trying to do for the vision of their game. Now, if they wanted to make a 60 frames per second mode and you can play it in that mode, but it's all choppy, it's uneven, there's a lot of pop-in, I think it creates a problem. You just spent a lot of time on a mode that people probably aren't going to want to play considering how bad it would look or the issues that it would have. So if you want to make a certain style of game, you shouldn't be limited to that because you're afraid of a backlash of it has to be 60 frames per second, 60 frames per second or nothing. And that's something that I've talked about before. Listen, we'd all love to have it in a bazillion frames per second, right? Sign me up. The best that you can get it there. But sometimes it's not always feasible based on the scope and scale of your game. Sometimes you can't really get it done because it's not going to feel great to play because of the unevenness, because you can't lock it down. Sometimes you have so many physics, mechanics, different things in your games, like Tears of the Kingdom, for example, to where it's going to be very difficult to hit that 60 frames per second consistently on the current hardware or based off of what you want to do. You want to lock it down, you want to get it the best that you can or have a higher resolution or whatever the case is. Doesn't mean that every game needs to be that, right? I mean, Nintendo just released Splatoon 3, for example, late last year, and that game's in 60 frames per second. But that's because it's a smaller end game in terms of confined areas and it's a multiplayer shooter, so you're probably going to want it at that, which is fine, right? They released other games, the Mario sports games, for example, or even Metroid Dread, right? 60 frames, Super Smash Bros. Fighting game. But certain games, maybe they're not going to do it, or maybe it's going to be uneven or unstable, or there's so many different things. So this whole debate between 30 or 60, no matter what, with no gray area, it's black or white, it's got to be 60 frames or I'm upset, I'm angry, without even looking into it and discussing things more, the situations surrounding it, to me could be a massive downfall in gaming. This could be a huge problem that we run into in the future because it might affect what some devs do. It might affect what's going on with this. And I feel that developers should be open, right? Should be open to doing what they feel is going to be the best for the player experience in their vision. That's going to lock things down the best for their game. It doesn't need to be this or this, right? And I think that a lot of this comes from, you know, obviously Sony's first party games being 60 frames per second, most of the first part. I don't think there's anything that's not at this point. There's always performance modes, but they really haven't created a game, the scope and size of a Tears of the Kingdom with all the different mechanics and the different stuff that that game can do. They haven't created that on PS5 yet. That's PS5 only. And they also haven't created a game like Starfield that's that big with space fighting and also with all the different customization, with the physics that it has, locations you can go to. By far, there's nothing on those systems, you know? So I think that we should look at it case by case and say, listen, this game does all of this, so therefore, okay, it's understandable, or it's on this hardware, compared to a game like, I don't know, like Returnal, right? Or compared to a game like God of War. Still impressive, very good games, but definitely the scope and scale isn't up to what we're seeing with Tears of the Kingdom, or up to what we're seeing with Starfield or some of these other big games. So this whole 60 frames or nothing, and we're not going to take anything else for an answer, this could be a big downfall in gaming. That's a major problem, but I do see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There are more and more people that are understanding this. There are more and more people that are having the voice of reason. There's John Lindman over at Digital Foundry, who's a big tech guy. He's always wanting 60 frames or higher, right? And he's talked about it on Twitter, saying, hey, look, you know, this is the situation that's going on. He's understanding. There's Gene Park over at the Washington Post that says, okay, I understand. Like, this is what's going on. You know, so more and more of the people that are out there, some of the bigger figures in gaming and different areas and entities that have a platform, are speaking about this. And I think that it's a positive sign when it comes down to it. Don't get me wrong. I want developers to have the 60 frames if they can, but it's not going to be a black or white issue. There's definitely some gray area. You got to discuss what the game does. There's more to it than that. But I really hope that these type of discourse and discussion doesn't become a major problem and even a downfall when it comes to certain things in gaming. But what are your thoughts on all this, guys, when it comes down to what I talked to here? Let me know in the comment section, and make sure you check out our other videos right here on screen. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you for the next one. Peace.